Climate crisis. Climate events such as floods, droughts, storms, and prolonged extreme temperatures may affect local and regional goods and services. A tornado may destroy a small town's only supermarket, cutting the food supply for thousands of people. A flood may close the gas stations of an entire city, rendering citizens impotent to use their internal combustion engine vehicles. A drought may impose restrictions on water use and cause local water sources to dry up. In the context of living off the grid, when a climate-related event causes a disruption in the needs of people, we have a climate crisis. Long-term cyclic climate crises may trigger mass migrations from one area to another, potentially causing a temporary or extended overpopulation crisis in areas receiving climate migrants. Climate-related events may also directly affect many people's needs and services. For example, a severe storm may knock out electric infrastructure and service for days to months. And floods may contaminate the utility water supply for days to months as well. Furthermore, flood or drought may affect farming and crops of an entire region. It may be difficult to escape the effects of climate crises even if you are off the grid. But being off the grid may, at least, help you cope with the effects much better. In some cases, it may help you avoid them altogether. Of course, each climate-related event has different effects and challenges. And living off the grid may help in different ways depending on the nature of the event or crisis. So, here we discuss a few crises caused by natural events, which are likely exacerbated by the climate crisis. Then, we discuss their possible effects and off-grid benefits. Storms. Storms come in many types: tropical storms such as hurricanes, typhoons or cyclones, tornadoes, and winter storms or snow blizzards. These may bring destruction to infrastructure, crops, structures, and bring direct harm to people, animals, and plants. Also, these may bring other follow-up crises such as floods, mudslides, lengthy snow cover, or drought. Consequently, these can bring crop failures, blockage of roads, and contamination of water supply. As mentioned, storms are thought to be made worse by the effects of climate change, according to most climate experts. They are made more frequent and more severe. The heat stored in the seas and the atmosphere, through global warming, are thought to be major factors contributing to alarming trends of storm severity. Tropical storms. Tropical storms may happen in vast areas of the world. Tropical storms generally form and affect areas near the tropics, the vast belt around the widest diameter of the Earth, the equator, stretching north and south each to about 23 degrees of latitude. In perspective, the tropics cover from near Havana, Cuba, to São Paulo, Brazil. This belt slowly changes position with the yearly wobble of the Earth, slowly drifting north, then back south once per year. Once formed, tropical storms may wander in any direction, including way outside of the tropics. Tropical storms may pack massive power, in the form of rain and wind, with wind speed ranging from 63 km per hour to 119 km per hour. At this wind speed, it is called a hurricane or cyclone. Tropical storms vary in the rainfall they gather. Some may harness and unleash unbelievable amounts of water in the form of rainfall. Depending on the track and the speed of these storms, this can bring significant to catastrophic flooding, to be discussed momentarily. Additionally, storms may affect electrical power with damaging winds or floods. The electrical company may shut down power to affected areas to prevent fires, electrocution, or other damage to people, electric infrastructure or other property. Electricity outages may last from days to weeks in the aftermath of a storm. Living off the grid may insulate you from the effects of power outages, simply because you may generate your own electricity using solar or wind energy equipment. Following a power outage, you may have to do with less energy and cut back on your consumption, especially so if you were not already 100% of the electrical grid. And if only because sunlight or wind may be scarce after a storm. Also, food and water may become scarce in the aftermath of a storm due to destruction, debris, flooding, electricity outages, and other factors. Hurricanes, typhoons, or cyclones are stronger types of tropical storms. And they can also wander far from the tropics, just like tropical storms. Hurricanes' wind speeds range from 75 miles per hour and up. Winds can reach upwards of 200 miles per hour, which are extremely destructive and can spawn other types of extremely destructive phenomena like tornadoes. Hurricanes bring the same types of effects as storms, just more intense, longer lasting, and more severe. For example, hurricane-type storms may knock out electric power for many weeks in hard-hit areas. At times longer, if the area is remote or there is little political interest in getting services restored there. I vividly recall the aftermath of two hurricanes in South Florida, Andrew in 1992 and Katrina in 2005. They both brought massive electric power outages, food, fuel, and water disruptions to vast areas of South Florida, especially in poor and marginalized areas where many immigrants, minorities, and low-income residents lived. There, seemingly, help arrived last, and goods and services were restored only after other, affluent areas were restored with services. I recall being without electricity for over 2 weeks in our areas, both in 1992 and 2005. There, flooding of the fragile infrastructures that supply densely populated areas, heavy dependence on corporate government, and the corporate addiction to profits, among other factors, likely contributed to the severe energy and the services disruptions I witnessed. These massive disruptions are often caused by seemingly minor and localized damage caused by storms. Some of the costliest hurricanes in history have occurred in recent memory. Hurricane Katrina in 2005, with $153.8 billion in estimated damages. Maria, 2017, $109 billion. Sandy, 2012, $67.7 billion. Andrew, 1992, $46.2 billion. Ike, 2008, $33.3 billion. Ivan, 2004, $26 billion. Wilma, 2005, $23.4 billion. Rita, 2005, $22.8 billion. Charlie, 2004, $21 billion. Tornadoes are a type of very destructive and short-lived storm. They are extremely powerful vortexes of wind that can reach speeds of over 241 km per hour or 150 miles per hour. Tornadoes pack a lot of destructive power over a relatively small area because they are generally compact and short-lived. But some large tornadoes may be over half a mile wide and travel over 10 miles. Having stored water will benefit the off-gridder during and after a storm. A storm will bring very little change to safely collecting rainwater. Although, during the worst of the storm, there may be violent and windy rainfall, but this period should be relatively short-lived. If you harness water from the body of water, these too may be affected by the storm. Contamination by dirt, debris, and chemicals is possible since the winds and flooding may carry all sorts of stuff into ponds, lakes, and rivers. Underground water is probably the safest source, since contamination, during a storm, is far less likely. If your water filtering equipment remains intact, groundwater may be used during and after a storm. Having solar photovoltaic equipment for off-grid electric power sources is surely the optimal way to avoid disruptions of electricity service during and after a storm. This is especially true in the tropics. Solar energy is quiet, relatively cheap, when compared to fuel generators. And solar energy is now highly dependable. The tropics are generally sunny, and renewable charge is plentiful with photovoltaics, especially when using capable batteries. If you are off the food grid to any degree, it can help you survive, sustain, and thrive during and after the storm. Stored food will likely play a large role in how you do during a storm, because the wind damage and possible flooding may have affected your ability to produce food locally. Survival food storage is an essential part of living off the grid, as you'll see in a later section. The ability to maintain communication may be among the most notable differences between those off the grid and those tied to the grid, during and after a storm. Storms may render utility communication unusable for days to weeks. Even cellular phone communications may be interrupted due to damage to cellular phone towers and/or stations. After a storm, if you are off the grid in your communications, you may freely communicate with emergency services and even aid in rescue or advisory operations. You may communicate with other off-gridders, including family and friends, using end-to-end radio equipment. Also, you may listen to weather and conditions reports during or on the aftermath of the storm, and be a source of updated information for those that are effectively incommunicado. If your neighborhood or community is struck by one or more severe tornadoes, the destruction and devastation may be overwhelming, even to those off the grid. There may be little else, of material and technological value, to help you live through the aftermath of damage from a tornado. However, those that survive the direct impact will surely benefit from the off-grid lifestyle, if only through their resourcefulness and efficiency. Most benefits may come from stored goods and self-service. Floods. Storms and heavy rain may usher floods. A flood may occur even in areas where there has been little or no rain, due to the overflowing of a river, lake, or the failure of a dam. Floods are especially destructive and deadly due to the nature of water. Water can quickly fill every empty space, run with incredible power, and carry even the heaviest objects by buoyancy. Even a home could be uprooted from its foundation and transported away by a large flood. People, plants, and animals may drown, be injured or killed in the wreckage of a flood. Many properties will suffer permanent damage when submerged in water during a flood. Floods may happen often or rarely, depending on your geographic location and many other factors, such as nearby bodies of water, average, yearly amount of rainfall, types of soil and vegetation, etc. These affect the likelihood and destructiveness of floods. Most experts believe that floods have become more frequent in recent decades, and studies have shown that to be among the effects of climate change. Floods can readily bring normal life to a halt. Water, food, electricity, and communications may all be affected by a flood. Water may become contaminated, or access to water may be cut off, or your movements may be restricted by water, sometimes for a long period. I recall in the early 2010s, Central Georgia, US, received a massive amount of rain, and some homes were cut off from the outside world by water. They became islands, with the only safe way in and out of them being through a boat ride. In such situations, your food and drinking water supply, and access to medicine and healthcare, may be cut off indefinitely or at least become difficult. Damage from storms that bring floods may oftentimes affect electrical and communication services. During a flooding event, these services are likely turned off for electrical hazard safety or to prevent further damage to infrastructure. You may be without electricity or communication services from hours to many days after the storm. Living off the grid may provide relief and safety in the event of a flood. Of course, this is dependent on many other factors and how extensively you are off the grid. Again, stored water and food especially will surely alleviate any shortages caused by a flood. If you have access to groundwater, a flood may not affect your source. However, your ability to filter and treat water may be affected if your filtering equipment was flooded. For example, if you have water treatment equipment in your yard, this area may be flooded, and the equipment may be damaged. Of course, placing this equipment in high ground would be optimal, but is not always an option. Food production and distribution will surely be affected by a widespread flood. Food scarcity may plague your area for long periods. Access to food and medicine may become cut off, difficult, or even dangerous. Again, off-gridders may offset these effects with stored foods and medicines. If you happen to grow your food and this ability has remained intact during the flood, you may be able to feed yourself and others in the aftermath of the flood. But consider that ground-level food production is likely to be affected by floods. Off-gridders will surely benefit from producing their own electricity and communication services. You may be able to continue producing these safely during and after a flood event. Of course, as long as the energy equipment remains undamaged or not flooded. Solar PV has the advantage that most equipment can be installed on the roof and apart from extreme flooding. This equipment is likely to remain out of water and working unless a catastrophic flood occurs. Other energy-producing equipment, like outdoor fuel generators, battery banks, propane tanks, and wind turbines may be affected by flooding to various degrees. There may be flooding instances where turning all energy-producing equipment is necessary for safety. Generally, if it generates electricity and is in contact with water, it should remain off. As an off-gridder, you should be prepared to live without electricity for extended periods. If health conditions require some electricity, the use of stored energy such as batteries is recommended. Utility communications may be affected by flooding. Telephone poles may have been knocked out by storm winds, or cellular tower or station equipment may be underwater or damaged by the wind. Here, off-gridders may be able to communicate with their end-to-end radio equipment. As there is no need for utility-owned antennas or stations, radio communication is rarely disrupted by flooding as equipment and antennas are largely installed well off the ground. Amateur radio operators often aid in communication efforts during crises due to this off-grid advantage. Droughts. What is a drought? Droughts are prolonged periods of dry weather lacking rain. Rain provides a cycle of water from bodies of water and the ground to the air, then back to the ground. This engine-like process provides vital and countless benefits to all living things. When this cycle slows or stalls, there is generally destruction of habitats, many plants die off, and animals migrate, adapt, or may perish. During a drought, crops could yield low or no fruit, and water may become scarce and costly. Examples of droughts. Crises causing droughts happen all the time, all over the world. Rain patterns change due to many factors, in the atmosphere and the seas. El Niño and La Niña events, in the Pacific, are examples of how sea events affect weather in vast areas, even globally. Crises caused by droughts could be mild or severe, depending on many factors. Your area may experience a short period of dry weather lasting weeks, or an excruciating period of no rain and dry weather lasting months. Here, in Middle Georgia, droughts are rare, and a few weeks of no rain is very detrimental for the many farming-dependent communities of the region. So here, for example, a period of 3 weeks without rain could bring large losses to some farmers, thus a crisis. Of course, the longer the drought, the larger the crisis, generally. I recall a period of drought in this area, around 2016, when even mature trees began to dry up and die. Luckily, I had stored rainwater and this helped me keep my many trees, especially my large pines, alive by irrigating them with the stored rainwater. How can drought affect you? Droughts could affect people on the grid by making utility water scarce, inconvenient, expensive, and even inaccessible. During droughts, your local authorities may demand you to conserve water, they may demand higher prices for water service, or both. Demands to conserve water are usually made for residential users, perhaps so that commercial and farming users can keep on trucking with their high water use. I know, firsthand, that these farming industries are protected by the government, and they use most of the fresh water. Further, they are given a priority because they are considered producers for municipalities. As a side note, I suspect that race has a lot to do with this government protection. Furthermore, many municipalities have private water service companies, which are looking to make a profit from their service. So, any threat to their bottom line will be offset, likely by gouging service prices. This practice is well documented. Lastly, droughts may impact those living in poverty, and in remote areas the most. And those living in areas of conflict, even more severely. To summarize, as many municipalities may be easily overwhelmed by climate events, I believe that everyone, especially those in dire situations, may benefit greatly from being off the utility water grid. How does living off the grid help during a drought? Water. During a drought, off-gridders may keep their water use unabated. They may use their reserves or continue to extract and use groundwater. They generally would not need to follow any restrictions on utility water, simply because they would not be connected to or would not be using utility water. An example may be, if off-gridders depend on a body of water or the rain for their water source, during a drought, the body of water may be running low or even drying up. In such case, off-gridders would need to depend on stored water until the rain returns. This may be accomplished in several ways. Without delving into much details, water access, transport, and storage technologies would be employed. Water sources to be tapped include ground, rain, or body of water sources. Details on these methods and technologies are to be included on Part 2 of this book. Food. A drought may affect fresh food supplies because your area's crops may be flooded and fail. This is especially true if you depend on local food products. Villages, tribes, and remote towns may have this dependency. During a drought, you may benefit from living off the grid, especially if you produce a significant portion of your food and your producing ability has not been impacted by the drought. For example, if you have stored water for irrigation, and if you use groundwater, whose supply was not impacted by the drought. Again, rural and remote areas may be more affected by droughts, since larger cities may import much of their food supplies from many and far away places. If the drought affects a very large area, the food prices will likely hike, especially in the areas supplied by the affected farms. Those off the grid may save money and even provide foodstuffs to themselves and others as much as possible. Details on how this is possible are discussed elsewhere. Utility electric. A drought may affect utility electrical power production, especially if your region depends on hydroelectric energy, which generally use dams. The water level on the reservoir of the dam may be too low to generate enough electricity for the area of service, and rolling brownouts or blackouts may be scheduled to offset this energy shortage. Of course, off-gridders may bypass these outages if they do not rely on utility electricity. A drought generally helps with solar energy, as there is generally more available sunlight and less cloud cover during droughts. Wind turbines may not be affected by droughts, although they may, if winds become low or scarce. Those using other alternative energy technologies will surely benefit in the same manner during and after droughts. Fire hazard. Naturally, droughts may bring a higher risk of fires, both wild and human caused. Lack of moisture contributes to more dry and combustible materials ready to burn in the forest and towns. Of course, uncontrolled fires may threaten human and animal life and create a local or even regional crisis. Destruction of all sorts of utility infrastructure, industrial infrastructure, farming land and its infrastructure, and homes may all be affected by and contribute to the crisis. Shortages of utility water, electricity, food, and access to communication may arise in the aftermath of fires. Those living off the grid may benefit greatly by their lower or non-dependence on the utilities, food, or fossil fuels. Additionally, fires may block access to many goods and services for indefinite amounts of time by blocking roads, bridges, or otherwise shutting down transportation. As you may expect by now, stored water, food, and energy may serve the off-gridder greatly during this time. Heat waves. What is a heat wave? Heat waves are prolonged periods of intense and unusual atmospheric and water high temperatures. If inhabitants of an area are not accustomed to experience high temperatures, such as in a heat wave, they may suffer, become ill, and sometimes perish. Examples of dangerous heat waves. There are heat waves occurring in many areas of the world, even in normally temperate zones like the far north and south regions of America, North Europe, North Asia, and Oceania. Higher than normal temperatures also often occur within the tropics. Crises causing heat waves are too many to list here. But notable ones include the European heat wave of 2003, the Siberian heat wave in July of 2020, and the Argentinian heatwave of December of 2022. Many of the larger known heat waves are catastrophic, discussed later, while smaller crises causing heat waves often go unreported. How can heat waves affect you? Heat waves may affect water availability because of drought conditions, which may accompany the heat wave. Bodies of water may run low or dry. For this, food may be affected by heat waves due to its impact on water and air temperature for crops and farming. Grid-tied utilities may be affected, as mostly all of them depend on utility water, electricity, and communications. These utilities may be sourced in hydroelectric plants, which may struggle to keep up with demand due to low water level in their reservoirs. Heat waves may especially impact the electrical utilities, because energy use may likely surge, as the pampered, on-grid people use large amounts of energy using their air conditioners and more, for longer periods. As a result, there may be brownouts or blackouts, exposing many to temperatures which may be unbearable for the very young, the old, the unprepared, or the dumb and fragile. Furthermore, the scarcity of water and food may also impact water and food prices. And those near or under poverty may suffer a range of problems due to inaccessibility. Heat may impact the overall economy, from labor shortages, power outages, to commercial and industrial closures. This topic on preparedness and climate crisis will continue on the next episode. Look for it very soon. Thank you.